Hmm? Okay, so we will start. ओम बटविटपि समीपे भूमिभागे निषन्नं सकलमुनिजनानां ज्ञानदातारमारात् त्रिभुवनगुरुमीशं दक्षिणामूर्तिदेवं जननमरण दुःखछेददक्षं नमामि। चिरं वरतटोर्मूले वृद्धा शिष्या गुरोर्युवा गुरोरस्तु मौनं व्याख्यानं शिष्यास्ते छिन्न संशयाः। ओम नमः प्रणवार्ताय शुद्ध ज्ञानैकमूर्तये निर्मलाय प्रशांताय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। So with the grace of the Lord we will start from today Dakshinamurti Stotra. I just there are quite a few Dhyana shlokas. I just picked only 3 of them. One or two we will see through the regular, some of them also we will see. See, Dakshinamurti is a very, very important in our pantheon of gods that we all worship. In fact, in this country, Guru is a very, very important concept. Therefore, after a little bit of Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita, I thought why not we go through Dakshinamurti Stotra. Because for a very unique reason, Guru is a very, very important concept in one's evolution. I think not just the spirit, although we quite often relate it to the spiritual part of it, I think we can generalize this statement. Guru is a very, very important element in one's evolution, whether it is materialistic or spiritualistic. Although we will look at more on a spiritualistic side because of the context, but that in no way will take away this statement. I think we need Guru. And we need Guru for anything and everything that we do. The importance of a Guru, particularly when we want to, spiritually evolve, becomes far more crucial. Therefore, we thought, why don't we look at Dakshinamurti Stotra? This is how the whole thought came. There is no way we can translate the word Guru as teacher. It is not possible, although that is the nearest English word one can. For last, I think year before last, my Guru, meaning my teacher in my engineering college, who I have great regards for him. In fact, I tell him, I am a teacher in an institution because of him. I keep telling him, sir, you have always inspired me like that. So he actually sent me wishes on Teachers' Day. I said, this is simply he sent me. So at the time when I replied to him, I told him, sir, there are 7 words which we can use. You have used the word teacher now. So at least I told him I think of 7 words in Sanskrit. And if you try to translate, all of them will become teacher. Because in English, I don't find a way of translating. Right? I told him, I sent him with all the meaning and I just shared it with him and I told him, I consider you as Guru. So I wanted to tell him, you are the Guru, not in any of these. The first word is what is called, you can say Adhyapakaha. There are different words available. One word is called Adhyapakaha. Just give me a minute. So, Adhyapakaha is one who is Adhyayanam Kritva Kinchit Vadati. So, you can take a syllabus, read it properly, and come and simply reproduce it in the class. That could be perhaps the nearest way of. Then you can use the word pradhyapakaha, which is proud adhyapakaha. He does this job even better. So that is another word which we can use. In fact, all of them you will have to actually translate it as teacher. So we can say pradhyapakaha. Then we can say what is called acharyaha. Swayam achinoti acharate api. He is called acharya. He practices himself. He is able to impart it to his students also. Then the word acharya is there. Then we also have what is upadhyaya. Then there is something called upadhyaya. In fact, upadhyaya should come before acharya. I think there are two words, upadhyaya and mahamahopadhyaya. Those two you should put before acharya. Because upadhyaya is, upa is closer. Upadhyaya. In other words, he will not teach you the syllabus. He will take you near the knowledge. Which means now I have to invest more before I impart a knowledge. So he may be an upadhyaya. So it is not just teaching, it's not a tutorial kind of a thing. Or giving just a piece of knowledge. Dakshinamurti Sutra, one can tell English meaning padacheda and that's it. So that may be an adhyapaka. So upadhyaya is somebody who should be able to take that person closer to whatever is the subject matter on which it happens. So mahamahopadhyaya, next level, much higher level, who can do it with a lot more proficiency and so on. Then comes acharya, right? Then comes deshikottamaha. Deshikanam uttamaha. So slowly these definitions move from a mere imparting knowledge to an ability to do acharana. Say Deshika is one who is able to live by and show what should be done. See, it's easy to say something, but one has to live by it and then show it also. So Deshikottamaha is another word. In fact, I think in Rabindra, this thing, PhD degree is awarded, it's called Deshikottama, I think, in Calcutta. Huh? So one who should be able to, by sheer living, they are able to radiate the truth and all that. So to that level one can go and call it as Deshikottama. Then comes Guru. So Panini in his sutra, he actually defined Guru. He actually defined. He says, Gakarasya andakaraha, Rukarasya tat nirodhanam. So now the role of a teacher, I mean all these are teacher in English. Somewhere I have to translate it as teacher. So the Guru is one who can lead the disciple from darkness to light. Gakarasya, tan nirodhanat, Guru it abhidiyate. Some definition is there in Panini's thing. So that is the highest level. So the Guru, so that definition of Guru is more a spiritual. So today Guru has become a business word. Americans say Guru. Guru is very oftenly used and they have all their own meanings. But I think Panini says Guru is one who can lead somebody from darkness to light. That is the biggest thing that can ever happen. That is why in this country, Guru is a very, very important idea. Guru is very, very central. So before we actually get into Dakshinamurti Stotra, I want to spend a little bit of time. Why do we need Dakshinamurti Stotra? Or in other words, why do we need this whole concept of Guru? I thought I will, little bit of time I want to talk about it as detailed as possible before we get into the shlokas, because that we can, as we go along, we can do. Suppose we call some 10 people randomly and ask what is the ultimate goal in life. Suppose we just call people, what is your ultimate goal in life? Because all of us are working for some goal and one can push them to the limit and ask what is your ultimate goal in life. Now I thought of some 7-8 answers. I was just thinking, if you had asked, for example, if a student, if you go and ask what is your goal in life, the student will not be able to tell anything Other than saying, I will get the highest mark, something like that he or she will say. My goal is to get the highest mark and maybe state rank, and this kind of thinking will come. This is all he or she can think. Highest goal in life. Somebody may say, I want to become very famous and known. I mean, these are real. There are a lot of people who are seriously thinking. I am not telling anything hypothetical. There are people who think their ultimate goal in life is to become famous and known. It looks like that. It is their ultimate goal in life. Somebody may say, I want to be the wealthiest person or maybe a powerful person. I want to be a very powerful person. So he puts all his effort on an IAS exam or an IPS exam. Because that is his or her conceptualization of what is his Janma Sapalya. If I have to use the Sanskrit word, Janma Sapalya. Janmaha Sapalata Abhavat. What is that which makes me feel that I have arrived, I have done in this Janma? So somebody may say, I want to be the wealthiest person. I want to be the most powerful person. That is another possibility. Somebody will say, I want to be the CEO. I want to be the most sought after person in the society. I have heard this. I have seen these people saying. So it is nothing hypothetical I am talking. Whereas some other people will say, no sir, my ultimate goal in life is I want to be healthy, tension free. I want to have no encumbrances. Anayasena maranam vinadainyena jivanam. People may say like that. That's all is my goal in life. Lots of people say that. Anayasena maranam vinadainyena jivanam. Dehime kripaya shambho. Tvayi bhaktim achanchalam. Give me that. That's all I need. Nothing else I need. A lot of people who seriously say that. Yeah. Some people will, you ask some other people, they say, no, my life, ultimate goal in life is carefree. Not worry about anything. Take it easy. Take it easy policy, if I have to say. Life has to be lived. Okay? Not worry about anything. That is what is ultimate goal in life. Why are you worried about anything? Let things come. This is called, in our scheme of things, called charvakas. In some ways. Some people say this is their goal in life. Why not? And there are people who say, my goal in life is to make others happy. They are very service oriented, samaja seva. I want to put smile on the face of poor. I mean, so I was just thinking for a while, some 7-8 such ideas came. Now the question is, why are people having, first of all, there are two questions. First question is there anything common in all these 8, 9? Now if you had asked another 10 people, would have got 10 more. And finally we'll all summarize it into some 10, 20 broad sort of possible goals in life. Now there are two questions. First question is there anything common in all these? Somebody saying, I want to be a CEO, and somebody saying, I want to put a smile on the face of poor people. Are they having two different goals in life? Or are they having the same goal in life? We need to have clarity on that. This is a question which was powerfully answered by Yajnavalkya to Maitreyi in Brihadaranyaka. I will bring that. Beautifully he answers. I will bring that set of shlokas. And he ends by saying, Shrotavyaha mantavyaha nididhyasitavyaha. That's how the shloka ends. That gives an answer. So the first answer I will bring it. First question. Is it all having a same thread from which these responses come? Or are there some 10 different 20 threads? This is one question. Second question is, even if it is from the same thread, which I will want to show, second question is, why are they saying differently? Why somebody says I want to put smile on somebody's face, somebody says I want to be wealthy, somebody says I want to be very powerful. Why is it happening? I think we need to first inquire and understand this reality of life that we are all going through. We need to understand that we are like that and we are like that for a certain reason. First of all, we will see, is it all of them common? Actually, all of them originate from the same idea. And that idea is all of us want to have happiness. That is a thread. From that thread, actually, all these came. That is the thread from which all these answers came. Somebody saying that I will be the number one state rank means that student sees happiness there. Somebody saying I will put smile on somebody's face, they are seeing happiness there. This is one level of understanding. But Brihadaranyaka Upanishad takes it to the next level. This is level 1. Now let us see what he says. So beautifully he says. Look at here. He says, Nava are patihu kamaya patihi priyaha bhavati, atmanastu kamaya patihi priyaha bhavati. He tells to his wife, Maitreyi, a wife loves a husband not because she likes the husband. It is because, I mean, it's a very profound idea. It is because that ultimately it gives me happiness inside. My antaryami, whatever that means, my antaryami feels satisfied. That is why I am doing. This is how he starts. He says, Are, hey, what are you thinking? That's what she is using as Sambodhana. Are, Nava are patyuhu kamaya. Just not because there is a kama towards the pati that, suddenly the wife became, priya, pati becomes priya to the. No, it is not like that. Atmanastu kamaya. Every one of us, not just us, it also includes the mosquito, the fly, the ant, the leopard, the tree, everything this will include. We do things in life because that is the one which, Atmanastu Kamaya. The Antaryami is thinks that I am fulfilled, I am satisfied. Like that. That is this feeling. That's what he is saying. Then he says, Nava are jaya kama. The husband does not love the wife for the sake of wife. Because that is the one which gave him that happiness inside for some reason. That is why he engaged in that. Otherwise he would have never engaged in that. That's what he is saying. Atmanastu kamaya jaya priya bhavati. Nava are putranam kamaya putraha priyaha bhavanti. I don't love my children because I love them. It is not like that. That act of doing it is something which satisfies my antaryami. I don't know why, but that is what it is. That is why I am doing. Otherwise I would have never done. This is what the answer he gives. He says, Nava are putranam kamaya putraha priyaha bhavanti, atmanastu kamaya putraha priyaha bhavanti. It is all, the reference is here. The epicenter of your happiness does not lie outside, it lies in the antaryami. It's nowhere outside. That antaryami is nothing but Shuddha, Buddha, Mukta, Satchidananda, Jnana, Satyam, Jnana, Ananta, all that with Taitriya we saw. That is what that antaryami is. So if that part of it can be little bit manifested, we will engage in that activity. That's what he is saying. So he is saying, Nava are vittasya kamaya vittam priyam bhavati. The wealth that going after is not because of wealth. Somewhere your antaryami is satisfied by that. That is why you are going after it. So he says, Atmanastu kamaya vittam priyam. He goes on like this. Nava are brahmanaha kamaya brahma priyam bhavati. Atmanastu kamaya brahma priyam bhavati. Nava are kshatrasya kamaya kshatram priyam bhavati. Atmanastu kamaya kshatram priyam bhavati. Nava are lokanam kamaya lokaha priya bhavanti. Atmanastu kamaya lokaha priyaha bhavanti. Nava are devanam kamaya devaha priya bhavanti. Atmanastu kamaya devaha priya bhavanti. Nava are bhutanam kamaya bhutani priyani bhavanti. Atmanastu kamaya bhutani priyani bhavanti. Nava are sarvasya. Finally he puts everything. He says, I don't want to keep on saying like this. He uses the sarvapada. He says sarvasya kamaya. Whatever you like and whatever you think you should go after, all that you are doing because your epicenter says by doing it I feel happy. So he said all that. He said that is why you go and search that epicenter. Because whatever you engage in the world is something which is coming from this epicenter. That's why he says, Atmava are drashtavyaha, shrotavyaha, mantavyaha, nididhyasitavyaha. Now the most important implication of this shloka, of course there are two implications. First of all, Every one of us say different things, but then the common thread is Atmanastu Kamaya. That is why we are doing it. That is the one which seems to give us some sense of satisfaction. Why and all we don't. That's the second question. We'll come to it later. The second most implication is all this talk that I felt so bad about them, therefore I am helping, they are all not correct. I want you to think about it. By saying I thought I felt very bad about them, by doing that will be good. It is not that. Everything is selfish at the end of the day. That's what this mantra is saying. At the end of the day, every one of us is selfish to the core, not in a narrow sense. Selfish, self I have to put in quote, ISH outside. That self is actually the Atmanastu Kamaya. So let us not first of all think that just because somebody is not feeling so bad, I am helping. No, you are helping yourself. By doing that, that's what he is saying. By doing anything that you do, you are actually first helping yourself. This thought that I am helping somebody is all second level, third level.
People are taking so many selfies because of that.
Maybe that's why they are taking selfies. I do not know. So the first question is answered. That people said different things, but all of them are originating from that epicenter. That epicenter is, I pursue, every one of us pursue happiness. As I am saying, it is not human beings. It is Sakala Jiva Rashi. Sakala Jiva Rashi will do this. That will go after what it thinks gives its happiness. That is why a lion will hunt. That is why lizard will go. The entire food cycle will also work like that only. So this is the first thing. Now, second question is, why are people so? So therefore, Brihadaranyaka clearly says the goal of every one of us in life. In Vyavahara, we may do different things. In life, the goal of every one of us is to reach the pinnacle of perfection and pinnacle of happiness. For nobody will say, I want to be sad. You can ask anybody. You can call anybody and say, do you want to be sad? Nobody is going to say yes. I think everybody will say, I want to be happy. So that is what the issue is. So I think we all have understood one point very clearly. The goal of life is to be at the pinnacle of happiness. This is an idea which is resident, which is wired into when the Purusha entered into the Prakriti, it has come because Purusha is Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma. So it is nothing but embodiment of bliss. Now the question is, and then this whole Prakriti came, all these frills came, Pancha Indriyas, Antakarana, Jnana Indriyas, Karma Indriyas, Pancha Bhutaha, Pancha Tanmatraha, Buddha, Chitti, Ahankara, Manas, everything was wired and given. And then the question is, how did this become in practice? The goal has not changed for any of us. Not today, not 1000 Janmas before, not 1000 Janmas later. We are pursuing the same goal. The goal is, I want to be in the pinnacle of perfection of happiness. Sat Chit Ananda Rupa. I want to be bliss. Nothing but bliss. That goal has not changed. The question is, how are we making this journey? That is where the difference is. That is where the whole thing traces differently. So the question is, how does it happen? How do we actually go into this and what do we do? So the question is, the whole idea now shifts to the journey. End point is known. The end point is, I want to feel happy in a very uninterrupted, untainted, continuous state. That is the goal. And we want to now pursue that goal and then get into the journey. So now the whole focus has shifted from the goal to the path. Because I know where to go, but I have to now find a way to go. This is what we are all doing in our life. Animals are doing, plants are doing. Now this is where this whole notion of evolution is there. So the evolution goes like this. You have the mineral kingdom or the mineral world or mineral kingdom, which for the first time gets a certain stability of structures and physical form. This is how the first expression happens. Some stability of structures and forms are established in a mineral kingdom. That's the lowest level of evolution. That's all. Then the next level of evolution is the plant kingdom, where all the earlier things are preserved and something more is added. So in the plant kingdom, the stability of form and shape is established, but the second issue which is added is what is called growth. The life is expressed. The organic growth is the second evolution that has happened from the mineral kingdom to the plant kingdom. That's one step ahead. Then you have the animal kingdom. In the animal kingdom, both these are preserved. The stability of shape and form is preserved. The notion of growth and organic growth is preserved. And there is a third dimension added. And that dimension is add the sensory organs. Put the sensory organs into it. So that is why, in fact, in the plant kingdom itself, this notion of sensory is starts manifesting slowly. That's why, you know, there is a set of trees in IIM Bangalore. Actually, you should go and see. By sunset, they will actually droop. The leaves will droop. There is a row of trees, many of these trees, they will droop. And then sunflower. So, you know, this notion of sensation manifests in a very, very rudimentary stage. But in animal kingdom, that is brought. So, three dimensions now added. Stability of form, organic growth, and the notion of sensation. That's why only animals can show the sensation of pain. Plant kingdom shows very indirectly, because it gets dries up. It's a very indirect expression of pain. Whereas animal kingdom for the first time will show the sensations, and because that is being added. Now the fourth evolution in that is human kingdom. Now what has happened in the human kingdom is these three are preserved. The stability of shape and form is preserved. The organic growth is wired into it. The sensation is added, plus two more are added. What is called the power to think and the power of free will. This is not available to any other. So we all belong to that. We all belong to that situation where we have sensation, we have organic growth, we have stability of form, plus we have free will and, you know, power to think, which are interrelated to one another. So this is the first level of evolution. Moment we step into the plant kingdom, these four bags are given. Whether we use it is our choice. And the first three bags are hardwired. So you can't make a choice. That's why I quite often say, an animal has no choice to decide whether I should skip the dinner or not, because it is driven by instinct. So when it is not hungry, the animal has no choice to say. Tiger cannot say, 6 o'clock I may become hungry, 3 o'clock there is a deer by the side of me, let me, you know, kill it and put it into the fridge. In fact, when an animal is not hungry, the two enemies will be peacefully coexisting, because they don't have this power to think. We have the power to think. They don't have. They are driven by instinct. So the human kingdom is the one in which four bags are given. The three bags are automatic. You have no choice. You have instinct, many of things are instinct. But we have an option to do something more than that. Now the question is, will we do or not? That is where the 10 different growth has come. 20 different answers came, because the fourth bag we decided not to open, or we opened the zip and put only a little bit of a stick and took something out of it. Somebody decided to open the whole bag and take the whole thing out of it. The choice is ours. So this is what explains, so which means human kingdom will be the pinnacle of evolution of the physical and the mental form. But then human kingdom will be the pinnacle of evolution at the next level, which is the Vyaktitva can evolve. Because mental form animals have already to an extent, then we have refined it a little bit more. So the whole idea is, how do we actually go to the next level, and that's where the different stages of progress starts happening. That some of us are able to use our free will, some of us decide not to use our free will, some of us think less, some of us think more, some of us think differently. That's where the Triguna framework will come. We can now, our system can explain why somebody thinks in a very perversive way, somebody thinks in a different way. All that is a different story. But these differences are brought, and therefore now the question is, all of us have to actually go. So let's return back to the story now. So now the story is, we want to find happiness. And this human kingdom is so beautifully wired with all kinds of things, thinking. So even if there is some delay, it is inevitable that the human beings will start using the power of thinking. Nobody can escape. How do you use is a different question. It will happen. So the first thing is, how do we go about pursuing happiness? Because this is our fundamental question. We will never leave this question. Now, how do we start this journey? Or how we could have started this journey when we stepped out of the animal kingdom into the human kingdom? Now, the first thing that would happen is, here is a new gadget with me called mind. Manas, Buddhi, Chitta and Ahankara, Pancha Karmendriyas and Pancha Jnanendriyas. So the first thing I will do is, if you give me a new gadget, I will start using it. It's a natural instinct. It's again an instinct, by and large. So the first pursuit of happiness is world outside. Indriyartaha. Indriya dwara indriyartanam, swikaranam. You start consuming the world of objects and start seeing pleasure. That's why a lot of people seriously think that a cup of coffee at 7 o'clock in the morning is a unit of happiness. Because 7 o'clock coffee is not there, there's a Mahabharat war. Or even if there is not a Mahabharat war, the head splits for some people into three. Why? Because we are in that range now. We think our pursuit of happiness is now related to the world of objects. This is how it starts. Now our own experience tells that after a while, it can happen, after a while can be after a few years, after a few thousand janmas also. So the time scales are in Vedanta very different. So after a while you have to understand, not after half an hour, can be after 300 janmas also. So after a while, the first thing that will happen is, two things will happen. This coffee law of diminishing return will start working. This coffee is not giving me enough happiness. Coffee becomes a Vesha also. This is a definition of Rajasic happiness in chapter 18 of Bhagavad Gita. Arambe amritam, then antime vishamiva. That's called Rajasic food. Right? In chapter 18 of Bhagavad Gita, there is a nice definition of shloka on that. Anyway, so for two things will happen. First of all, we find this is not happiness. But before that, we'll find one more thing. This happiness is not staying with me for long. It's not worth then. One cup of coffee, half an hour, the effect is there. After that, I am back to misery. No, I can't put one more cup of coffee, then that is a very dangerous thing. I have to wait for another 4 hours to get that happiness again. So two things starts happening in our experiment. First thing that happens is, this unit of happiness is very imperfect. It is short-lived. So that itself bothers me. Why is this not extending? Coffee is an example. We can relate it to many things in what we believe in happiness to be. Second thing that we say is, if you overdo it also, we find that it is not really taking me. If I like, let's say, halwa, after 1 kg halwa will become actually vesham for me. I will actually get admitted. Truly it will be poison, please understand. Yeah. So then we, using our own mind and buddhi and chitta, after a while, whatever after a while means, we will first understand these are all short-lived, this is not happiness. That clarity will come. Now this mind will say, then we will start searching. If this is not happiness, so I think the first major war that we have to win is to understand the world of objects which we actually consume through the sensory organs and use it, will actually give us a happiness which is imperfect, which is short-lived, which is intermittent, and which is not growing beyond a point. So then naturally the second question will go, so this is not happiness, where is the happiness? Obviously, because that is our original pursuit. Our pursuit will never change. Since this is the original question, we will not run away from here. So then we will start looking. Then we will, if you look at the Veda and all that, Veda will say there is another world. This world is okay. You can have a happiness which is much more long. The longevity is much more lasting. So you can do Ishta and Purta. You can do all kinds of Ishtis. You can do Purta and you will be rewarded with heaven. So the notion of heaven comes. In all religious things it is there. The notion of heaven comes. And our thinking temporarily changes. That seems to be a much bigger thing. So the whole pursuit of happiness will... So this evolution will start giving importance to things which will give me... Chapter 7 of Bhagavad Gita, he says, Chaturvita Bhaktaha Santi. Artha, artha, jnani, jignasa and jnani. This is a path of evolution. That's what he is saying. It is a path of evolution. So the happiness will take us to that. And pursuing that, we will actually come back to square one. We will go nowhere. And there are any number of references. If you say, how do I know? Either we will have our own implicit experiences gathered through several janmas, or we have enough of literature where informed people has told us. So now I want to show you 2-3 shlokas. There are plenty of references. I am just taken only 2-3. Just to emphasize this point. So the Antakaranam and the Indriyani as the basis, that's how we will start. Obtaining happiness as well as knowledge. We'll enjoy the pleasure and the happiness, but then we find it is very transitory. Transitory, it is not really working. Then slowly the belief comes there is something bigger than this. And efforts to discover that, higher order happiness, multiple attempts to find it. So where will these multiple attempts take us? That's the next question. And we are not looking at worldly pleasure now. There is something called an other world, and there is an otherworldly pleasure which is much larger in scope. Therefore we naturally shift because we think in the pursuit of happiness that is much larger, so we are on the right track. So chapter 9, and these 2 slokas are very important because Krishna has so beautifully placed these 2 slokas. Because after these 2 slokas, you know what he says? Ananya Chintayanto Mam. That's the 22nd sloka. If you understand these 2 slokas, the 22nd sloka makes a lot of meaning. Ananya Chintayanto Mam Ejana Paripasate Tesham Nitya Abhiyuktanam Yogakshemam Mahamyam is what he says. Before that he brought 2 slokas. Look at this sloka. It says, Traividyamam Somapaha Puta Papaha Yajnai Rishtvaha Swargatim Prarthayante Te Punyam Asadya Surendra Lokam Ashnanti Divyan Divideva Boghan. So first he says, these Puta Papaha, these people are all absolved of Papa. They are purified out of Papa because they have understood the rudimentary things they have understood in this world. So they are not going to get into, small things, cheating others, stealing, making others hurt. We have moved from there. We have found that that's not where our happiness is. We have already moved. Then we are looking at the bigger one. So using the 3 Vedas, whatever is there, they do all these ishtis, right? Somapaha. They are all doing different types of Soma Yajnas and this and all that. They have, in this part of Soma Yajnas, you have to take the Soma Rasa. That's why Somapaha. Somapa is Bahuvrihi, Sarvam Bahuvrihi Atra. One who has actually drunk Soma is Somapa. Soma juice. That's what it is actually. So Puta Papa, one who is absolved of Papas or purified of Papa, Bahuvrihi. That's also Bahuvrihi. You will find a lot of Bahuvrihi. Yesterday I was mentioning about that. Right? Swargatim Prapte. So they will go to the other world. And what will they do? Punyam Asadya Surendra Lokam Ashnanti. They enjoy, their happiness multiplies. So-called happiness multiplies.
We saw that prayer also. Happiness prayer.
In the Taittiriya. We saw 10 power 20 up to that. So it can go to any level. So all that is possible. Whatever we saw in Taittiriya Upanishad also is part of it. All that. Then Krishna, what does he say? Say, Tetam Bhuktva. Bhuktva is the Tuanta Prayoga. Bhuktva, having eaten. Tetam Bhuktva Swargalokam Vishalam, in the Swargaloka, having consumed all these niceties, Kshine Punye, Punya is now exhausted. Martyalokam Vishanti. This is a world of birth and death. Karma Bhumi. So Martyalokam Vishanti, Evam Trayi Dharmam Anuprapannaha, Gatagatam Kama Kamaha Labante. Kama Kama is Bahuvrihi. Those whose desire is only desires. Kamanam kamaha yasya saha kama kamaha. Again Bahuvrihi. Tatpurusha. Kamanam kamaha kama kamaha. I think. So they think they have to go on this path. But after some time they find that is also not taking us anywhere. That perfection is still not reached. They realize perfection is still not reached. There is something wrong. Mundaka Upanishad also says that. The mantra before this is even interesting. It says Ashta, Yete, it says 18-winged boat, which is imperfect. That's what, there is a nice mantra. Ashta dasha, plavaha yete, like that, there is a nice mantra before that. Look at what he is saying. Ishta purtam manyamanaha varishtam na anyat shreyaha vedayante pramudaha. Vedayante is the verb, so from there we have to now start. They have not understood na anyat vedayante. Kim na vedayante? Na anyat vedayante. They didn't know anything else. Who are they? Pramudaha. They are the ones who did not know anything. So yesterday I was showing this is how we have to get this meaning. Vedayante na anyat shreyaha. They don't know anything which is better than this. Better than what? Ishta purta manya. They think Ishta and purta. Ishta is, is Shrauta karya. Purta is Smarta karya. Purta is, you do all, make, build hospitals or, Loka Kalyanartham. All that is Purta. Ishta is all Shrauta karya. Ishti is different. So all that they do, because they think that is ultimate. Nakasya Prishte, they go to the pinnacle of, that Loka, right? Anubhutva, having enjoyed that, Imam Lokam, they come back to this world where we are Hinataram, even worse than this. They even go even below this. So like this, there are several references in Shruti, in Smriti. Bhagavad Gita is a Smriti and Mundaka Upanishad is a Shruti. In Puranas, everywhere it is there. So our pursuit of happiness at the second level has also got us to a dead end now. All these we have to travel. We are only looking at the knowledge now. So this pursuit of happiness will not take us anymore. So what is my situation now? Assuming I went through all these paths. Now there are two implications of this path. First implication is, I want to make this very clear. Every one of us will go through each of these paths. Or some of us have already gone through some of them. This is a continuum. Now, you have to be crass materialistic, because out of that only you will put a value to materialism and come out of it. Otherwise it is impossible. Not by reading. Anubhuti is very important. So crass materialism is required. Because out of that we will understand the true value of materialism, we will take our hands off. Out of enjoyment only we will put a value that enjoyment is of no use. So the implication of all this statement is, then we need a set of ideas, because in my rudimentary stage of pursuit of happiness, I want materialism. I want to practice ultimate materialism, sensual, everything. Because unless I practice it, I will never come out of it. So I need a body of knowledge. Then I need a body of knowledge for every level. So our entire knowledge system has everything. Charvaka philosophy is beautifully applied to the modern day crass materialism, Charvaka philosophy. We have everything in our schema. Why is it required? Because our knowledge repository recognizes that everybody will be in a continuum. You can't take people from here and then put them there. It's not possible. Unless we have anubhava, knowledge will not take us anywhere. Only anubhava will take us to the next. So the implication of this is, we will have smart. So that's why in Veda you will have everything. Veda will talk about Ishti, importance of Ishti at the Purva Bhaga. At the Uttara Bhaga it will say this. It says Ishti is of no use. Person who reads it will not read that. Person who reads that will not read this. What I mean is, that kind of a knowledge repository is part of our system. No conflict. We have not understood if you see conflict, that means we have not understood what it is. So this is where the whole idea of Guru comes now. Now the whole idea of Guru is now resident here. Why? Because I tried with my body and sense organs. God has given me, I have been evolved into this new gadget. I tried, but then I found this is not solving my pain and suffering. What I thought is happiness and all finally sort of disappeared. I also find after long years of this, not only I recognize that is a source of pain and suffering, I am not able to get away from that. It's a very complex situation we are in now. I know this is bad, but I am not able to come out of it. In the sense, I don't know how to do it. The framework is missing. This is what many of us will be. I think many of us will be in that. We know this is not, but the Indriyas are so powerful that it will take us into it, the manas will lead us into it, and then we may regret a little later. So, unable to get away from the sway of these, Antakarana and the Indriyas is a genuine problem that many of us face. Pleasures in other worlds are also short-lived. Even if you don't have experience, there is a scriptural knowledge which we can have faith on. So even that path seems to be problematic. Now the question is, how do I go forward? I am stuck now. How do I advance? This is a genuine question. Every sadhaka, this is a genuine question. Everybody who is ordained to be in the path of evolution, everybody who will ultimately in their pursuit of happiness will get into that happiness, will land. Because we will not settle until we remain in that happiness at an uninterrupted stage. See, we also every day have that uninterrupted state of happiness for about 3 hours or 4 hours in Shushupti. But unfortunately, Anubhavaha asti, Jnanam nasti, awareness is not there. That's why we are talking in past tense. It is like, something happened and you are distancing yourself and talking about it. You can only talk about, you can only say, I had a good sleep. I had a very comfortable. When you say your face will be very bright. I had a good sleep. There's a lot of, but we will say in past tense. So, this Anubhava is missing. First we don't, awareness is not there. Anubhava is there, awareness is there. So we vaguely recall, which is of no use. Although it motivates, in fact, God has wired Sushupti only to motivate us to say that there is something called happiness. Please open and see. This is wired into our Prakriti. This is the motivating factor for us to go after that pinnacle of happiness. So we are stuck. We don't know how to go. Now we need a possibility now. So somebody has to hint this possibility. We need some mechanism. We need some mechanism, and the first thing that we need to be told and taken through is you cannot discover this by looking outside. The Indriyas are of no use. In fact, it cannot be reached by Indriyas. That is why in Shushupti, Indriyas were not there. Manas was not there. Buddhi was not there. Ahankara was not there. Sthula Sharira was dead. Only when you left all of them you enjoyed. But then we didn't have awareness. So this possibility has to be hinted and some path has to be shown. Ahetuka Daya Sindhu is what he says in Viveka Chudamani. He says Guru's definition is Ahetuka, there is no cause, there is no reason why he should be a Daya Sindhu. Huh? No reason why he has to be. Without reason, he will shower his blessing. That is, we need a person like that. Otherwise, we will never get out of this. We will never be able to get out of this unless somebody who can be a Ahetuka Daya Sindhu. Hetu Nasti. Ahetu is na plus Hetu, Ahetu. Ahetuka Daya Sindhu is the word Shankaracharya uses in Viveka Chudamani. He says that Guru will actually get you out of this samsara sagara that you are in. So the point is, we need to find a path ahead. We will never rest on the pursuit of happiness because that is what we are. But then we may be stuck. We can be genuinely stuck. We go and then look at it, that's not giving me happiness, that's temporary, short-lived, and then I don't know what to do. Many people actually push this idea under the carpet. That means our spiritual awakening has not happened. Everybody experiences it, but people just push it under the carpet. That means that is dormant, it is not awakened. Those who become uncomfortable about this, for them the grace has happened somewhere. That kataksha has happened somewhere. So the spiritual awakening is a possibility. So the point is, we have to do a few things, otherwise this getting out of this is not possible. First thing is a complete resignation on the part of the disciple to the will of the teacher. With our normal things it is not possible. We will be just wasting our time with using this rational brain, using these indriyas, no. It's all, we will be just, It is something beyond this, which means we have to now switch off all these. If we have to switch off all these, the only way we can switch off is by surrender. Otherwise, the ego will never be switched off. It will start evaluating the Guru how much he knows. As he keeps talking, hey, how much this fellow knows is what will happen to us. Genuinely it will happen. So unless that surrender happens, there is no way out. And revering the Guru in the heart is very, because this model is very different. This paradigm is completely different. You have to get out of our current paradigm of things. Unless that happens, it will not work. And in order for that, so this whole journey requires knowledge and devotion. Mere knowledge is of no use. Brain is of no use. In fact, I have been saying this in the past. I run a Bhagavad Gita course here, an MBA level course. I do a very interesting experiment with them. I want to teach them what is heart and brain. It's very hard to teach heart and brain. So what I do is I give 2 videos. I just give them 2 videos, some 2-minute video, 3-minute video from the YouTube. I ask them to write 3 keywords. After I tell them, look at the first video. As soon as you look at the first video, we have to write 3 keywords. That's all, nothing else. Then I tell them, write, what will you do? What you thought you should do now? Is there something which happened to you which you wanted to? So these students write. A stunning piece of responses come, because if something appeals to the brain, what they say actually revolves around ahankar. That's how the statements you can analyze. I have some 300 statements with me in the last 3 years, whatever I have gathered. It's so interesting to see it. If something appeals to the heart, what happens is these words that they use is very powerful. And I jokingly say, if there is a word of meter in which you can feed the word, the needle will fly for the second video. Because they feel very strongly. They say that I felt like crying. One fellow says that this weekend I will go to Kadalur and meet that couple. That video is a 3-minute video. That video talks about a couple who talks about 14 or 17 children. They say, these are all our children, and we understand they run a, sort of a orphanage. That's what they say, and up to 1 minute you don't know what they are saying. I mean, you generally listen. Then you get very serious, because somewhere in the middle of the video they say, sir, the place where we are standing, we lost all our 3 children in the tsunami. This place only we lost our 3 children in the tsunami in our own eyes. We got 14 children back. Like that they say, and then they continue. In between, no trace of unhappiness even when they say it. When my students see that video, the kind of things they write. So point is, Bhaktitva, if it has to blossom, if this personality has to evolve and blossom into a very fragrant 1,000-petaled flower, Sahasrara Kamala, if it has to open, devotion is very important. Devotion is the only one which will melt the heart. Knowledge will harden the heart. Knowledge is operating from brain, it will only strengthen ahankar. Devotion will melt the heart. And so that is what a guru will actually, somehow he will show that the devotion and knowledge must go together. Having only devotion but not knowledge is also difficult. Having knowledge and no devotion is also difficult. Somewhere the guru will actually hold that 2 things for us. That is why the guru is required. He will not only give knowledge, he will actually, the surrender will start the devotional pipeline for us. It will open the tap for us. That is why the surrender is very, very emphasized in our, in Visishtadvaita, the Prapatti is taken to the highest level. Sharanagata and Prapatti is the highest level to which Visishtadvaita has taken. I think we need to borrow that very strongly. Otherwise, if we can't surrender, this knowledge will stop at a point, it will not flow. So this is where the whole idea of guru has to come, and that is why guru is greatly revered and is a very important piece in everybody's life, because we will not give up our pursuit of happiness. So this is the background I want to talk about as guru, because Dakshinamurti is nothing but a symbolism of guru. So we need to understand that this concept of guru is so central to our growth. How do we find it? Guru, the notion of guru, and about guru we can keep on talking. I don't want to keep doing that. But the Guru comes in many ways. Guru comes in the form of a child. Guru can come in the form of if a word uttered. Guru will come. While we have to keep making effort, the Guru will come to us. We will never go to the Guru. This is my experience also, my own experience also. We should not be found wanting in the effort, but Guru will come. Guru will come. In fact, Shankaracharya, he says in his Shivananda Lagari, in the 61st sloka, he says, Ankolakam nija bija santatihi ayaskanto palam suchika. He gives two examples. He says, Ankolakam nija bija santatihi. The Ankola tree will shed the seeds. The tree cannot move. The seed only have to move to the trunk. Apparently, the seeds will move to the trunk. The Ankolaka tree's trunk will be full of studded with seeds. The seeds are hairy seeds. They move towards the trunk and then they get stuck there. Seeds.
No, sir, you can see that in fact this Ankola tree is available in Trichy.
No, it is available in Yerkad. It's available in Sherwari Hills.
Yes, and it's available in Calcutta also. You can just see the seeds moving to the tree.
I am told if there are if there are two Ankolaka trees, if this tree's seed falls here, it doesn't use shortest path algorithm. This seed will come to the mother. This seed will go to this. Okay? This is the first example Shankaracharya gave. Second example he gave was Ayaskanto Palam Suchika. He used magnet and the needle. Now anybody can attract anybody else. Magnet can also move to the needle. Needle can also move to the magnet. Either way, this is how the trajectory of Guru also happens. We have to put the effort. The Guru will come unto us. I mean, all of us will have that most satisfying repeated experiences if we are honest and we are genuine. The Guru manifests itself.
The student is ready.
It will come. There are ways by which it will happen. So that Guru is what is being represented as Dakshinamurti. So I will just put that kind of background. So today, Dakshinamurti's Stotra is one of the compositions of Shankaracharya. So I want a little bit talk about these compositions of Shankaracharya very briefly. Little bit detail I am going to talk 2 days from now in some detail in a different dimension. Shankaracharya did three major things. First set is called, he is also a Bhashyakara. He wrote Bhashyas, commentaries. He wrote commentaries for the Prasthanatraya, the three most important pieces of text, which is Brahma Sutra, Dasha Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita. So 10 plus 1, 11 plus 1, 12. He also wrote another Upanishad called Narasimha Tapaniya Upanishad. It's a very, Acharyas give actually this thing. They make Sankalpa and give it to their devotees, important devotees. Narasimha Tapaniya Upanishad actually. So Narasimha Tapaniya Upanishad also he wrote a commentary. Then he wrote there are about 16 pieces on which he wrote commentary. Then he wrote a commentary on Vishnu Sahasranama. He wrote a commentary on Sanat Sujatiya. See, in Mahabharata there are 4 crust jewels in entire Mahabharata. They are all very close, one behind the other, not in too much span. The first in the chronological order is Yaksha Prashna. That is the first. And the second is Viduraniti. The third is Sanat Sujatiya. Viduraniti and Sanat Sujatiya are back to back. After Vidura says 700 shlokas and tell to this Dhritarashtra, why are you not getting sleep? You are doing something wretched. That's why you are not getting sleep. 700 shlokas are there. Then Dhritarashtra gets even more restless. He thinks things are very bad for him. That time Sanat Sujata comes. He gives a discourse. He also, it's a philosophical discourse. So that's very important. So there is Sanat Sujatiya he wrote actually. Then of course Bhagavad Gita. These 4 are very nice pearls in Mahabharata. He wrote a commentary for Sanat Sujatiya. Then he wrote a Bhashya for Lalita Trishati. He wrote a Bhashya for Hastamlakiyam. I don't know who, I think Hastamlaka, I don't know who has done Hastamlakiyam. I have not read that, so I have no idea. But he wrote a Bhashya for Hastamlakiyam also. I don't know who has done this source. I have let to check in. So he did 16 Bhashyas. That's his first contribution. Then he did what is called Prakriyas or Prakarana Granthas, which are all philosophical treatises on Advaita Siddhanta. He wrote about 23 odd works. I put only some of things here. Viveka Chudamani is the magnum opus with 580 shlokas. In fact, Dakshinamurti is a magnum opus of that 580 in 10 shlokas, I should say. It's such a high pedestal it is put. Dakshinamurti Stotra is placed like that. That comes under Stotra, not under Prakarana Granthas, although it is actually a Prakarana Grantha. I'll talk about it later. There is something strange about the Stotras that Shankaracharya has written. Then, of course, Bhaja Govindam and Atma Bodha, Tattva Bodha, Prashnotra Ratnamalika, although there are so many Upadesa Sahasri. Huh? Atma Bodha, Tattva Bodha, all those are there. So he did about 23 Prakarana Granthas, which are all philosophical Vichara, emphasizing Advaita Siddhanta. Then he did about 70 plus what is called Stotras and varieties of Stotras. The Dasa Shloki is what he said first when he met his Guru in Narmada, which he uttered at the end also. If you look at, at the end also he uttered the same Dasa Shloki before he, ascended on the Kailash and so on. So the Dasa Shloki, Eka Shloki also, there is one Shloka he has said. It's called Eka Shloki. Of course, there are Laharis, Shivananda Lahari, Saundarya Lahari and Ananda Lahari. The first two are 100 shlokas, the second is 20 shlokas. Slightly a shorter piece and so on. And then so many stotras. Stotras are varied. For example, look at here, there is a Kashi Panchakam on Kashi, on the city. Then there are stotras on rivers, Ganga and Ganga Ashtakam, Yamuna Ashtakam and Narmada Ashtakam. He has Yati Panchakam, Maya Panchakam is about this Maya. The Maya, it's a nice sloka actually. Maya Panchakam. Yes. Kalubhagyavantaha. That's also there. So like that, and then of course on a number of gods and goddesses, because he had traveled very widely. So Dakshinamurti Stotram belongs to this category. Although, by subject and all that, it belongs to Prakarana Grantha. It is a pure philosophical treatise which tells us in this journey where are we and what should we look at and make sense of the world. That is what this whole Dakshinamurti Stotram is. I think with this brief sort of an introduction, we'll stop here. It's already 7 o'clock, so we will stop here. Next week, we will see a little bit more, again, certain things about Dakshinamurti Stotra, and then get into the individual stotras. Next week, we will continue. Thank you.